Welcome, everyone. This is Sam, and I'm being joined by Meghan Keller. And we're going to be talking about her time in the military and a little bit about what she's doing now. So, Meghan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Meghan Keller. I served in the United States Army Reserve for 8 years, but out of that 8 years of service, I spent 4 years in active duty. Um, I was a sergeant and an Arabic linguist. Um, and currently now I work for a veterans nonprofit organization called Heroes in Transition, and I serve in the role as the fundraising and events manager.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. So, let's take it back kind of from the beginning. Just tell us about your career, active, reserve, deployment, garrison. I'd love to hear all of it.
Yeah, well, I joined the reserves right out of high school. And so I did my basic training down in Fort Jackson and Columbia, South Carolina. From there, then I got to go out to the beautiful Monterey, California, where I was out there for about over a year studying Arabic. Then after that, I went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona for Intel school. And then when I kind of slipped back onto the reserve side of things, I was with the 325th Military Intelligence Battalion out of Connecticut. But I was attending college. I was going to Suffolk University, right? So I got into college after I got out and was attending college at Suffolk University in Boston. And then 9/11 happened. And
Mm,
being in an intel unit and being an Arabic linguist, we got our orders that October after 9/11, and we deployed. Well, we got activated when we were down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We had a first phase of people that ended up going to Afghanistan. I was not part of that rotation, but then we went to Iraq in 2003.
interesting. So, I guess the most fascinating thing that catches my attention is that you were getting into the Arabic language before that was the in thing, if you will. So was that? I mean,
Yeah.
it is a pretty language, and it's you can get bored with Latin languages. So was that something you were interested in, or that was just a directive put upon you?
Both. So I took an African Middle East class when I was in high school. So, I mean, yeah, the Middle East is just fascinating.
Yeah,
History, yeah.
I
So,
agree.
yeah. So, that was part of it. But then I took the test, it's the D-Lab test, which, to get into language school, I don't even know if they do it still or not, but when I did it, it's like Pig Latin. It's like a fake language
Huh? Yeah.
that at the start of the test you're kind of given rules, grammatical rules, different things, and then you flip the page, and then the questions are to apply those rules that you had to learn quickly. So I did, don't have me do math in my head, but on that test, I scored very well. So they have languages that are in different categories. So Arabic is slotted as one of the higher category languages. So I think I
Which
had the option of it was Arabic, Chinese, and I forget what the third one was,
which
but
Chinese?
because of
Mandarin or
my interest, I went with Arabic.
okay? Which Chinese? Cantonese or Mandarin or both?
They learned Mandarin. Actually, I joined the
Okay.
military with my best friend out of high school.
Okay.
So we both went to Monterey, California. She studied Chinese and I studied Arabic, and so yeah,
Okay.
she learned Mandarin.
And so is that test? I hadn't heard of that test. Is it almost like an aptitude test to see your capability to pick up and understand a language?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yep.
then were the ones you chose kind of tiered based on difficulty of learning? Because I know Russian's very
Yes.
difficult. Arabic can be a challenge. Obviously, the Latin ones for English speaking people are easier to learn because they're all Latin
Yeah.
based. But Okay, so that
Yeah.
makes sense. That's
At
interesting.
the time they're like German, German I think is a little bit was easier. They were actually at the time they were teaching there was Spanish as well, but I don't
Okay,
think they do that anymore because we have so many I think speaking
yeah,
individuals in the service. It's no longer needed. So I hope someone might catch me on that. But from what I heard from somebody, they no longer teach Spanish.
okay. And you can go with this next question. You can go however far, however hard you want with it. We're always open to discussing anything, but we're also understanding of individuals' willingness to discuss however much or not all of it.
Mhm.
So, next question being, what were the biggest or some of the biggest challenges you faced, and then what was key in overcoming those challenges?
Well, we were in Iraq in 2003. It's referred to, I think, at the time we just had a reunion. It was like the Wild Wild West. So, and we were a reserve unit. So when we were
Mm-hmm.
over there, we were not well equipped. Our vehicles were sandbagged. We did not have. I was in the old like flak vests from the Gulf War. Like we didn't have
Mm.
plates.
Chocolate
Um,
chips, chocolate chip
yeah,
uniform.
yeah, and we didn't even have radios. So one of our biggest challenges, we were ill-equipped when we were there. So with my unit being a reserve unit, and we had a lot of counter intel agents in our unit, which a lot of them were also police officers in their civilian lives. Yeah, we actually had the police like departments sending us plates to put
Wow.
in our vests. So we were using like having people send us radios, handheld radios that obviously
Mm-hmm.
weren't on any great channels or anything like that and could have been intercepted, but like that's how we had to communicate. Yeah, we kind of had to
Yeah.
really kind of push things together. So so I would say that's probably one of our biggest challenges. We were extremely ill-equipped when we got in country. So
Yeah.
something that we had to face. Yeah.
A friend of mine deployed 4 times. Nick knows him too. And his first deployment, he was part of the group, the large group that busted the berm. And he said when on our deployment, when I was with him, he was like, it was the Clampets go to war. He was like, it was, yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, Wild West. They didn't have stuff, so they had to make do. There were way
Yeah.
less restrictions and everything, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I just can't imagine because I came at the end of the party when there was all the
Yeah.
restrictions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess we were lucky, and I mean, we at that time, we were going to get our dessert, like going to the eating chicken, and we were out in the streets, and meeting the Iraqi people, and I mean, I got to see a lot of the country. But then things started to get a little crazy towards the end of the deployment.
Mm-hmm.
We did lose, with the IDs, and I actually was part of, unfortunately, one of the mortar attacks at Abu Ghraib,
Oh,
where, yeah, and so I was one of the few people that walked out of that situation that did not have shrapnel in my body. So yeah, towards the end of our deployment, things really started to pick up. But actually, another very challenging thing that happened to me, and I kind of forgot about it, and I was having a conversation with somebody the other night, and I was like, oh my goodness, how heavy it weighed on us since we were a reserve unit, and we had done, some of us had done a year in at Fort Bragg, and then we got backfilled with a lot of different folks from units all around the country to when we went to Iraq. And so for the folks that were not with us at Fort Bragg and were only on their first year of the deployment, because as reserves, they can't hold you longer than 2 years, but we hit our 2 year mark. And so we had to go home, but we had a big contingency of our unit that had to stay, and like leaving your people behind, and it was hard. That was really, really hard.
yeah.
And I think of this actually hit me because I lost my husband, Kurt, when we came home from Iraq. And I realized his whole entire team he left behind. Like
He was the one, the only one.
yeah, he had to leave. He had to leave four guys behind that he was in charge of. And I think that weight, it hit me the other day. I was like, wow, that must have really, I don't know. I think it's one of those things I just shoved down and didn't really think about. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was hard.
Okay. And were you and Kurt in the same unit then?
Yes, we were actually. I know 9/11. I say my daughter actually just wrote a story, her college essay about 9/11. Like it's this horrible, tragic event that happened to the country, and but kind of like how something so horrific, but like good can also come out of these horrific situations.
Right.
So yeah, because
Yeah.
my unit was we had a detachment in the Bronx. We had headquarters and a company out of Connecticut, and then we also had Alpha Company was out of Fort Devens in Massachusetts. So we were kind of all spread out throughout New England. So when we were activated down to Fort Bragg, we had to stand in alphabetical order to in process. And so my maiden name is Kelly and
Hmm.
Hertz now Keller. And so we had to, the good old Army military, hurry up and
Yeah.
wait. So we stood in lines for long periods of time during that in processing and got to know one another. So yeah, so part of that deployment. Yeah, we met and started dating, and so yeah, and so part of our relationship was we were in Iraq. We were not together. He was mainly in Baghdad the
Hmm.
entire time, and I kind of was all over. I was in Tikrit. I was in, like I said, I was in Abu Ghraib. I was Balad, Fallujah. So, but he was mainly in Baghdad. So, but yeah, and then we
Okay.
came home from deployment, and he proposed to me in the Boston Globe. There was a big coming home party and big news coverage because we were kind of the first wave of folks that were coming home from that initial deployment from Iraq. So the
Hmm.
Boston media paid a lot of attention to when we were coming home and covered us. And yeah, and then he happened to propose to me in the newspaper. So it was pretty cool.
Nice. That's great. And then how long were you engaged for, married?
So we were engaged for, oh my goodness, we were engaged for a year and got married. Yeah, it was a lot. We basically like got home, got engaged, jumped back into our jobs.
So you planned a wedding.
Actually, no, he jumped back into he'd be a police officer. I actually still was in school. I kept getting pulled from college, so I hadn't finished my degree.
Yeah.
So I went back to college. Yeah, we bought a house. Bought a house, got a dog, got married, got pregnant. Like boom, 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 boom. It was a bit of a whirlwind.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think as reservist and your life is your way, it's like you have your civilian life and you have your military life. So you kind of feel like all of that was on hold. And everybody, your friends and colleagues, their careers are progressing, and all of our friends are getting engaged and married and having babies. And so it's like almost like we came home and it was like this catch up, like we had to like catch up to everybody. So I think part of that, you really don't think about or work on yourselves or process truly what you have been through.
Yeah.
We just kind of really jumped in head first.
Yeah.
Um, and also our time coming home, there were not things like Heroes in Transition, the organization I work for.
Right.
People were not talking about PTSD. Those things were just not discussed. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah, that's why I am now working in this role that I am, because I know that we need programs like Heroes in Transition to help veterans, get back into civilian life in a healthy and smart way.
Hmm. So speaking to that, your transition? How was your transition out of the military? And I know it's kind of weird too. Like, luckily, I have insight to this being reserved, but like,
Mm.
it kind of depends on what you have going on the civilian side, but also you're coming out of the reserve, so you may be better set up, may not be. So if you can speak to all that.
Like I said, we kind of just jumped into everything when we came
Mm-hmm.
home. But in being from Massachusetts, there's not a lot of large military installations or things like that. Or, I wasn't really aware of anything.
Mm-hmm.
What what benefits I had. They didn't really do a good job on informing us when we are out crossing at Fort Dix, like where to go, like who to talk to,
Mm-hmm.
and then I got right out of the service. Pretty much my contract when we came home from Iraq was over, and I decided not to re-enlist. So yeah, you were kind of on an island, I'd say. I don't know when it comes to any type of military support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're really kind of figuring out on your own. Yeah, I didn't even really know I had things that happened to me in Iraq that were considered service connected. It wasn't until oh my goodness, probably 10 years after I got out, that I was dealing with the health issue, and someone I knew happened to be married to a VSO, Veteran Service Officer here in Massachusetts. They help you navigate the benefits. And she said, well, why didn't you go to the VA? And I was like, well, I can't go to the VA. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, don't you have any service connection? I'm like, no, I don't have anything service connected. What would be service connected? You think of,
You'd be
you know,
surprised.
yeah, like I'm
Yeah.
like, I have my body, it's been whole and intact, and then she made me go, and I realized I was like, oh my goodness, yeah, like good thing
Yeah.
I went. Yeah, so after that, kind of learning, um, about what's out there to support you, but it took a
Yeah.
while. It took a long
Okay.
time.
And then coming out of that, were you able to find a cause to kind of devote yourself to that's bigger than yourself? I know you were working on
Mhm.
school while in the reserve. I know
Yeah.
you had a lot going on, as we've been talking about. So where'd you kind of find yourself landing?
Well, it first started when I was actually went to school. Then I went back to school with the post 9/11 GI Bill that came to me, which
Okay.
just showed up in the mail one day. So I knew nothing about that as well. So that was exciting. So that came, and so I was like, oh, I'm going to utilize this. So I went back to school for physical therapy. And while I was back in school in Boston again. Commuting this time from Plymouth when I was raising my daughter. But at that time, there was the home base program that was started through the Red Sox Foundation. And there was a lot of promotion of that in Boston. And a big race of theirs is called Run to Home Base. So I participated in that. And then also went and got some treatment with them. That's when I learned about post-traumatic stress and complicated grief and all those things. So that was kind of the start of my healing was with them. Then from there, I was on the board of directors for an organization in Plymouth that serviced the South Shore of Massachusetts called Hydrea for Heroes, and worked with them for a little while. And then that kind of no longer, it's not as not really around anymore. And so then I found Heroes in Transition due to their biggest fundraiser called Ruck for Hit. I got involved with them on the PT side of things, volunteering. And that has just getting involved with them and seeing what HIT does, and all the programs it has to offer veterans. It was just something I wanted to be involved with. And it just continued to grow and grow. And now I actually left physical therapy and working for Heroes in Transition full time as the fundraising and events manager. So
Okay.
yeah, and um, I like giving back and working for something like this because I just, like I said, from it, I just know the importance of that we need organizations like this because they were just not around for me when I came home.
Yeah, fantastic. What soft skills would you say you kind of developed in the military, if any? You sound organized, so maybe you're already pretty organized, but maybe what soft skills did you learn in the military that you've been able to apply since getting out?
My interpersonal skills, like interpersonal communication skills, like learning to communicate with, I mean, with all different people from all walks of life.
Hmm.
I mean, that's, I kind of grew up in a little suburb of Massachusetts and, getting into the military and meeting so many different people just kind of opened my eyes to the world. And so, yeah, I would say my communication skills.
That's a great one. In fact, I don't think we've heard that one, but I'm a big believer in communication between handling leadership in the army, both above me and below me, and especially on the civilian side, being in sales, and of course also being in a marriage,
Mhm.
communication and really making it clear, not even always what you're asking, but why you're asking it. I was just having a conversation with someone earlier today about, something I try to do is if I want to know why, sometimes the simple question of why people think you're second guessing, and so I'll
Mhm.
kind of word it like, can you tell me more? I want to learn. And sometimes I'll even say, I'm not second guessing you. I want to know. I want you to educate me why.
Mhm.
And so I think communication definitely gets slept on. So that's a good, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is a very good skill because even people who aren't particularly good at it are probably better at it having been in the military than they would have been otherwise. So,
Yeah.
um, now, if you were to go back in time and see yourself as you're signing up for the army day one, what advice would you give yourself?
Said, oh my goodness, you're stronger mentally than you realize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Say that. And I'd say go to airborne school.
All right, two good ones. Two good ones right there. I like it.
I did the skydiving thing actually for a fundraising for it was to raise money for another veterans organization. I went skydiving and I was like, it's amazing. And then I was like, oh, I should have gone airborne. So
Okay, that's awesome. Good deal. Then you kind of mentioned a handful already, but as far as veteran benefits you've been able to take advantage of, are there any you haven't mentioned yet that you definitely think people need to pay attention to and probably use if they have the opportunity?
goodness, what I didn't even realize like for my mortgage.
Yeah.
I didn't even when I bought I think at the time, actually, I think the VA rates weren't as good as the time when I bought my first house. But when I went to buy my second house, I didn't even think of it. And then I ended up like refinancing into a VA loan. So I was like, I wasn't even aware of that, which is huge that people should take advantage of. Um, yeah. And then the VA, disability claims. I guess in my mind, I thought, there are people that are worse off than I am, and being in the service, like asking for help or accepting help can sometimes be hard to do.
Yeah.
Um, and you don't think you like not necessarily. It's not that you don't think you deserve it, but I don't know. Like you think you're taking it away from somebody else that deserves it
Yeah.
more than you do. But someone said to me, like, if these services are not utilized by us and the military and the government like see
Hmm.
like stuff that happens to us, both physically and mentally, that we need to be cared for and taken care of after getting out of the service, then those services will not be there for the next generations to come.
Yeah, it's true. In fact, we just had a relative of mine on an interview or two ago, and he was saying, I wasn't even tracking this. He makes a big deal out of he encourages everyone to use as much of it and as many things as possible, because there was something, and I can't remember what it was. We'd have to go back and watch the episode, but it actually got pretty much cut in half as far as the allowable amount of money used for it. And the reason was because people weren't using it, and the number that they fell back to turned out to be about half, but it was based on the fact that that's the average amount that people used. And so that was kind of a wake up call for me, where I'm like, okay, I probably need to start diving into things. And I want to fly helicopters. So Nick helped me find a place where I could use a GI Bill to learn how to do that. So
Yeah.
just kind of just the sky's the limit as far as using these benefits. So that's,
Yeah, and then I
yeah.
used the I think they call it something else for a little while too. Unfortunately COVID happened and then it just kind of put a stop to it. But I was starting to pursue my master's with the I think it was like VRNE, the Voc Rehab, but I think they call it something else.
Okay.
But yeah, there is so much out there. So um I don't know. I know the state of Massachusetts, I don't know if any other state, but like our veteran service officers, we're lucky here in Massachusetts, there's one assigned to like each town. On Cape Cod, it's a little different because of the population, but so there's a couple on Cape Cod, but they're great for helping you navigate the VA system. Um,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, to bring it into a close, we used to start with this question. Now I think it fits better at the end. But if when you think about funny stories from your time in the service, what's one that just jumps out every time? You're like, you love telling it. It still makes you laugh years later. Um, what comes to mind?
I think one of my favorite stories was um, Staff Sergeant Wynne Jamison. He was like our comic relief when we were in Iraq. He would tell these stories, but half the time they were like made up. They weren't true, you know. It was but they were just so entertaining, and people would like sit around and just like listen to him. But half the time it was he was joking and it wasn't true and all this other stuff. But so you never know. You never knew what to believe with what he was saying.
Was it kind of
And
like Norm Macdonald? Norm Macdonald do that, like on interviews. He'd tell this whole story and turn out he was just setting up a joke,
yeah,
kind of like
yeah,
that.
and that
Yeah.
was him. But he was great. He was the best storyteller and the best jokester around. But so we were coming out of country. Actually, it was when we were in. We left Iraq. We were in Kuwait, waiting to come back home, and it happened to be around Christmas time. And so we went to the PX and we were walking around and or actually no before this I'm sorry, he was telling me that Harry Connick Jr., you know Harry Connick
Yeah.
Jr., the
Hmm.
singer and actor, was his brother-in-law. And I was like, no. And he had a package from actually that's what he did. And he's like, look, no, this is from Harry Connick Jr. This is my brother-in-law. And and it said from like some fancy town in Connecticut, one of the expensive
Hmm.
rich towns in Connecticut. But I'm like,
Yeah.
who knows? Like it could be any hair, like it could be a joke. He could have made this up. So I did not believe
Hmm.
him. So, but he was on a mission to convince me that this was his brother-in-law. And so this was before like cell phones where you could like pull up pictures and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So, that was before the iPhone. So it wasn't like he's like, look, here's a picture. So we're in Kuwait and he goes and drags me to the PX because Harry Connick Jr. came out with a Christmas album because Wynn was deployed. He dedicated it to him. And so he opened it. And
Oh my
so,
gosh.
yeah, so that was the one truth I think he may have told the entire time we were in Iraq. So yeah, that was a pretty cool story.
Well, that's great. Megan's been awesome. I love getting to add to our library of information and brilliant minds. So thank you so much for throwing your hat in there and contributing to all that we have going on. It's been fantastic having you on. And if you have any other thoughts, let us know. Otherwise, we can close out and you can go back to whatever you need to go back to.
I'm going back to plan our largest fundraiser, Ruck for Hit, and I'm about next Thursday, actually, no, next Friday at 1 a.m. I am about to, with my team, we're about to run over 200 miles across Cape Cod through all 15 towns
Wow.
um, while we're carrying 10 and 20-pound rocks. Um, and yeah, to raise money for Heroes in Transition. It's our largest fundraiser. So this year I've been involved with planning it. I'm captaining a team and I'm also running it. So yeah, that's what I'm heading into next
Awesome.
week. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service.
Also, one thing we did not bring up on the podcast, it happened to be Eric's 45th birthday on April 12th. And we actually made that as, well, not we, well, the team hit put together that now is going to be recognized as Eric's Jones Day. And then we also, with a former colleague of mine, at the rehab place, he made us a song for Ruck for Hit that we have now being distributed on all the streaming platforms for
Oh,
Spotify and all that kind of stuff. So I'll send you guys the link to to that stuff as well. Thank you guys so much for having me and earlier with Cindy. This was awesome.
well, thanks for coming on, and we will talk to you later.
We thank you for listening, and we hope you got something helpful out of this.
Right now, the best way to support us is to simply spread the word. If you know a fellow veteran who could use some resources to elevate their life, send them our way.
Until next time, remember to check your zeros, 5s, 10s, and 25s.